Assalamualaikum and good afternoon, everyone. My name is Nurhanis Hayati Hairum. I am a principal researcher in MIN SRC Campus Parit Raja, and I am also a lecturer in FTK under the Department of Civil Engineering Technology. This is the presentation outline, so I will share with you about the assessment components for PSM 1 and 2, thesis writing guide, PSM flow, and PSM report structure. This is the assessment components for PSM 1. So as you can see here, supervisor will assess your PSM 1 for 60%, whereas panel will assess 40%. Basically, supervisor will assess 15% for e-logbook from the system, and then 45% for your project report. Okay, and then panel will assess your presentation during your presentation session for 15%. Okay, in terms of your project understanding, presentation style, Q&A session, and self-confidence. And also the panel will assess 25% for your project report or your proposal. All right. For PSM2, as you can see here, same as PSM1, supervisor will assess PSM2 for 60%, whereas panel will assess for 40%. However, there are differences in the percentage breakdown. Okay, so supervisor will assess 15% for your e-logbook from the system, 35% for the project report, and 10% for the technical paper. Panel will assess 10% during your presentation session, and then 15% for your thesis, and 15% for your technical paper. Alright, this is an illustration to show the main focus in PSM 1 and 2. Alright, many students are confused and assume that there is not much difference between PSM 1 and 2, when in fact there is a big difference. So ideally, PSM 1, you will more focus on the planning of introduction, problem statement, objective, scope of study, literature review, and methodology in future tense. Whereas PSM2, you will more focus on the carrying out the experiment, okay, based on the chapter 3, and then the data collection, data analysis, discussion, conclusion, writing thesis, and technical paper in past tense. Actually, the real picture of the activities that you have to do throughout PSM 1 and 2 is like this. Okay, so I advise you to focus and act quickly and systematically to ensure that all these activities run smoothly. Okay. Alright. So now we move on to how to write a PSM report. Okay, so please always consult the UTHM thesis writing guide. Okay, each university typically has a guideline of university's thesis writing with specific details for the preparation of your report. So apply the thesis writing guide to your report, to your thesis or proposal, even to the first draft. Okay, so it can help you with the format in terms of text layout, reference style, nomenclature, figures, tables, and other important items. So it will save your time and supervisor. Therefore, you should download the guideline as shown in shows in this slide. Okay. Okay. All right. Next, the goal of this part is to provide advice about how to properly structure your thesis. So before we can come to the details of each chapter, I would like to refresh the parts of the thesis. So we have abstract, And then chapter 1, introduction, followed by chapter 2, which is literature review, and then methodology, result discussion, conclusion, and recommendation, and finally references. Alright, so abstract in a thesis should be a single page summarizing the background, problem statement, objectives, methodology, results, and conclusions. So to write a good abstract in a thesis, you must follow this rule, answering these 5 questions. Okay, so here is an example of abstract in a thesis. So it begins with a summary of background, followed by summary of objectives, and then it have a summary of methodology, then summary of results, and finally it ends with summary of conclusion. So for introduction, actually introduction is used to provide context for your thesis and convince the readers why your work advances a field of study. So be concise in the introduction, but give the reader enough information to understand why the work is important. Alright, so this section should not be a history lesson. Kalau history lesson tu dia dah jadi macam literature review, but you do need to introduce the main scientific publications on which your work is based. So references which cited in chapter 1 may also be cited in chapter 2. Okay, in problem statement, okay, we have to state clearly the problems that we need to solve. Okay, so you should emphasize the existing problem that motivates you to carry out the present work. You need to state the gap of study, okay, or the lack or weakness of previous study that need to be improved. You also can define the specific industry in problem statement, but I advise you to state the company name of industry if you already received the permission from them. Okay. Next, in introduction, you can also you have to state the rationale and significance of study. And then for the objectives, it should be specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, and within time frame. And it reflects to the solution or output to the problems. You can use action verbs that are specified enough to be evaluated. For example, to determine, to verify, to calculate, to elucidate, etc. Okay, this is for scope of study. This is the part that you need to narrow down the objectives. So the scope explains the boundaries within the work that you do, such as the specific area that you focus on within a field. Right, for literature review, it is untuk literature review ni, ideally it begins with a general approach to the topic, then move toward the more specific problems that need to be resolved. So theoretical on experimental analysis, equations, calculation formula, etc. also need to be explained thoroughly in this chapter. Okay, in literature review, apart from the explanation in a script, dalam paragraph yang panjang-panjang lebar you explain tu, you also can use table, figures or bullet points to summarize the data as per the table. Alright, to write a good literature review in a thesis, you must follow these rules. Okay, I hope you can go through the rules on your own. Okay, macam writing about a topic in terms of how well it was done and what it has achieved, analyze and synthesize literatures, to explain what is their findings to show the significance, etc. Okay. Okay. You must have a reference for every statement of fact in literature review. Okay. Next, you need to refer to the latest 5-year studies to show that your project is up to date. Okay, do not rely too heavily on one source only. Okay, next for methodology. Alright, methodology should explain the methods to conduct the research. So try to be in line with the research objective. So it is important to be detailed. Okay, a knowledgeable reader should be able to reproduce the experiment. Contohnya bila saya baca thesis dalam methodology part, saya baca dan saya buat, saya berjaya hasilkan benda yang sama. Itu yang you kena sangat detail in the methodology part. Okay, so any previously published produce should not be rewritten, okay, in detail. This can be noted in the references or described in the supporting material section. So for equipment ni, identify the equipment and materials used in experiments along with their sources. Okay, so if the work is computational or theoretical, kalau you guna yang computer theoretical tu, here you can describe code, computational or analytical methods. Okay. Alright, if I'm not mistaken, it is compulsory for you to provide a flowchart of the overview of the whole project. So it is advisable to include each phase and each phase of methodology and also the obstacles that may encountered along the phases in the form of decision box. Okay, yang diamond shape ni. Alright, then you can refer to the symbols, to the standard symbols for the flowchart. Okay. Alright, for result and discussions, okay, many students are confused and assume that there is not much difference between results and discussion. Tapi dia sebenarnya there is a big difference, okay, between them. So as you can see here, results explain the important findings of your study that help to answer your research question, whereas discussion explain what your findings mean and implications to your area of study and to related fields. In a nutshell, results are the findings or the outcome of the project or the task that you carried out, versus discussion is the explanation on the results. Okay, result ni yang you buatlah dalam graph, table. Okay, discussion ni dia explain the results. Okay, alright, so your discussion section should answer the questions. Okay, what do your results mean? And the majority of the discussion section should be an interpretation of your results. Alright, in discussion, we have to ensure all these main points in your script. Okay, so critical interpretation of results, make the discussion correspond to the results. Do not make statements unsupported by your data and compare your results to published results. Ataupun literature lah maksudnya. Alright. To write a good discussion, okay, to write a good discussion, it should comprise of 50% of what, 30% of why, and 20% of who. So this is an example of a good discussion. As you can see, it begins with explanation on the what. Okay, what did you do, what did you find, and what it means. And then followed by some explanation on the whys. Okay, which is justification on the results or justification on the what. And then finally, we end with 1 or 2 lines of the whos. Okay, with 1 to 2 sentences on the whos with reference to reputable people in their respective field. Okay. Next, we can move on to the conclusion part. So, purpose of conclusion is to give a summary of what was learned, the shortcomings of what was done, and the benefits, advantages, applications, etc. of the research. Right. So, conclusion summarizes the project. So it shows that you have proven the point you set out to make, and it gives the reader a sense of completion. So if you notice, when you read a good conclusion, it will give you the answer for each objective of the project. So this is the meaning of sense of completion. And then it leaves the reader remembering your main point. If you notice, that sounds kind of like the introduction. So what is the difference between introductory chapter and concluding chapter? So inilah beza dia. Okay, the difference is the approach to the topic. So think of these two chapters as funnels, one leading toward the body of your thesis while the other leads the reader away from the body. Body of research means the results and discussion part. So the introduction begins with general statement and then move toward to the more specific statement. Whereas for conclusion, dia start dengan specific and then dia berakhir dengan general statement. Okay, for example, general statement in introduction adalah give the general one first. For example, metal oxide have a good characteristic in wastewater treatment. Okay, but the specific one in introduction must be the objective of the project. So it is very specific. For example, therefore this study aims to synthesize zinc oxide nanoparticles via sol gel method for palm oil mill effluent treatment. Okay, so it is very specific. Okay, alright. Example for the conclusion, for the specific. Okay, untuk conclusion pula, it begins with the specific one, which is actually you conclude the main finding based on the results and discussion. Okay, so it is very specific because it is based on the result and discussion. So you conclude the main findings, and then it will end with the general statement in conclusion. Okay, which is the implication to the environment, society, etc. Okay, for example, for the general one, therefore it can be concluded that zinc oxide nanoparticles have great potential in industrial wastewater treatment for greener environment. Okay. Alright. How to write conclusion? Okay. Nothing new is presented here. Each conclusion is brief because you have done in the body of thesis. So just straight to the point in conclusion part. Okay, and then state the important implication. Okay, and must be clearly stated. Alright, next, recommendations are suggestions for future research. So this section may be added to the end of the conclusion and recommendation section. And then you may mention a long-term development that could be based on your work. Alright, these are the examples of verb tense that you can write in recommendation. Please ensure that all are in future tense. Okay, dalam recommendation. For example, it is recommended that the experiment should be replicated. Be replicated is replicated. Alright, that's all from me. Thank you for to indicate your attendance by filling in this online survey form. Thank you.